She, a 17-year-old girl, was bought as a wife by a cold and calculating millionaire. He bought her as a wife, but what starts as an agreement quickly turns into a maze of intense emotions. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Lily was born from silence. A hard silence, from a childhood without comfort. Empty plates and prayers murmured among the noises of the big city. At 17, her light steps traversed the cracked sidewalks of Chicago with the dignity of someone who carries in her body the history of women who learned to resist with sweetness. Her delicate hands, calloused from work, held a worn wooden tray filled with golden coconut candies, still warm hush puppies, and homemade cream-filled pastries, made in the cold pre-dawn hours alongside her grandmother Rose, a woman with trembling hands and a stubborn heart, who raised her granddaughter alone. They lived in a two-story house worn by time in Lincoln Park, between peeling walls and memories of a past that refused to die. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar always permeated the small rooms, mixing with the aroma of strong coffee that never ran out, even on the most difficult days. Lily woke before sunrise, prepared sweets using recipes her grandmother kept in memory, and went out onto the streets with her tray, humming softly to ward off fear and loneliness. She was a virgin, not out of fear, but by conscious choice. The world had already tried to snatch her innocence too soon. Heavy gazes from old men at Mr. Johnson's bakery, indecent proposals whispered at the bus stop, control attempts disguised as protection. She protected herself as best she could, with strategic silence, with tireless work, with unwavering firmness in the brown eyes she'd inherited from her mother. She grew up hearing that a poor woman's body was cheap merchandise in the hands of those with power, but she decided that hers would have value, the value of freedom, of waiting, of true love, even if it seemed unattainable on the grey streets of the outskirts. On the other side of the city, wrapped in gleaming steel, Carrara marble, and bulletproof windows that filtered the sunlight, lived Michael Blackwood. 43 years of heavy existence, a civil construction empire inherited from his father, a name feared in the corridors of power, a past buried 7 keys deep in the vaults of his memory. Since the tragic death of Victoria, his wife who was 7 months pregnant, who fell down the main staircase of the mansion in circumstances never well explained to the press, Michael had become a shadow of himself. His eyes, once as warm as the coffee he drank on Sunday mornings, became as opaque as the antique mirrors in his mahogany office. He slept poorly, haunted by recurring nightmares of what he couldn't protect, of the son he never got to hold in his arms. He hadn't smiled in 3 years. He hadn't played piano in 2. He loved only the long silences of the library and the rare wines he collected without tasting. It was on an ordinary March morning, while discreetly visiting a social project in South Side, a daycare built in honor of his deceased wife and the son who was never born, that he saw her for the first time. Lily was sitting on the sidewalk of irregular cobblestones, selling her sweets with the patience of someone who knows hunger, her brown hair tied in a quick braid, her young face shining with sweat and silent determination. She didn't even look at him when the black car stopped in front of the daycare gate. She continued arranging the sweets on the tray, checking if the coconut candies hadn't stuck together in the morning heat. But he saw her with a clarity that deeply frightened him, as if for an instant suspended in time, something dormant inside his chest resurrected, as if life began to pulse again in his veins, numbed by pain. Michael got out of the car with automatic movements, greeted the daycare director with his usual cold cordiality, but his eyes constantly returned to the girl on the sidewalk. There was something in Lily's upright posture, in the delicate way she handled each sweet, in the serenity with which she endured the strong sun that reminded him of Victoria. Not physically. Victoria was blonde, fair-skinned, born with a silver spoon, but there was a similar dignity, a silent strength that transcended differences in class and color. Throughout the visit to the daycare, where he should have been focused on operational reports and financial statements, Michael found himself observing Lily through the windows. She had sold most of her sweets by noon, was talking lovingly with a child who had approached asking for candy, unhesitatingly sharing a hush puppy with a street boy who begged with his eyes. When he finally left the daycare, it was late morning, and Lily was arranging the last sweets on the tray. Michael approached, asked for a coconut candy without looking directly at her, extended a $50 bill for a sweet that cost $2. She looked at him then for the first time, and her brown eyes met his with an intensity that made him step back. "I don't have change," she said simply, without false humility or apologies. "Keep it," he replied, his voice hoarser than intended. Lily studied his face for a moment that seemed eternal. She saw a handsome, well-dressed man with marks of suffering around his green eyes. She also saw power, danger, a world to which she would never belong. She returned. "The money." "Thank you, but I don't need charity." She picked up the tray and walked away, leaving Michael standing on the sidewalk with the bill in his hand and an emptiness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Victoria's death, a smile almost formed on his lips. Almost. That afternoon, locked in his office at the top of the corporate building bearing his name, Michael couldn't concentrate on the $1 million contracts spread across his mahogany desk. The image of Lily returned like an obsession, her tied-back hair, her careful hands, her eyes that didn't bow before his money. Michael wasn't a man to act on impulse. He had built his empire on foundations of patience, strategy, and absolute control. But that afternoon, after meeting Lily, he did something he hadn't done in years. He acted driven by a restlessness he couldn't name. He called Marcus, his right-hand man and private investigator, a discreet man who knew the darkest secrets of Chicago's elite. "I want to know everything about a girl," he said, giving him the approximate address where he had seen Lily selling. "Sweets. Name, family, routine, debts, dreams, everything." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't question. He had known Michael for 15 years, since before his marriage to Victoria, and knew that behind that cold facade was a man capable of great passions and irreversible decisions. In 3 days he had a complete dossier on Lily Sanders. The 17-year-old girl lived with her grandmother Rose, 72, in the house on Maple Street, number 247. Orphaned by an unknown father and a mother who died from childbirth complications, she was raised by her grandmother, who had worked her entire life as a domestic worker in family homes in Wicker Park. Lily had studied until her junior year of high school, abandoned her studies to help support the household when her grandmother began showing signs of stroke. She had no known boyfriend, attended St. Mary's Church on Sundays, woke up at 5 in the morning to make sweets, and traversed the city selling her homemade merchandise. But there was something else in the report that made Michael's blood freeze. Lily had been harassed for 2 years by Devon the Devil Harris, a 40-year-old loan shark known in the neighborhood who controlled drug trafficking and prostitution in the region. He offered protection to the neighborhood girls in exchange for sexual favors and had a particular interest in Lily since she turned 15. The girls systematically refused his proposals, but Devon wouldn't give up. On the contrary, he intensified the pressure with each refusal. The report also revealed that Grandma Rose had suffered a small stroke 3 weeks earlier, was hospitalized at Memorial Hospital in delicate condition, and the treatment cost more than Lily could pay by selling sweets. The girl visited her grandmother every day after finishing work, slept at the hospital when possible, and was accumulating a hospital debt that grew daily. Michael closed the dossier and sat in silence for a full hour, observing the city through the bulletproof windows of his office. Lily's story touched him in an inexplicable way, awakening in him a need for protection he hadn't felt since the days when he dreamed of protecting Victoria and the son who was never born. But there was something more, something dangerous, desire, a desire that grew like a silent obsession, fed by the memory of the brown eyes that faced him without fear on the sidewalk. It was then that he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The following Thursday, Lily was at the hospital, holding Rose's wrinkled hand when she was called to the reception. An elegant man in a grey suit and gold glasses introduced himself as Dr. Robert Miller, private attorney. "Miss Lily, my client would like to make you a proposal that can solve all your financial problems and ensure the best medical treatment for your grandmother." Lily looked at him suspiciously. "What kind of proposal?" "My client, Mr. Michael Blackwood, wishes to hire you as a wife. Not as a mistress, not as an employee. Legal wife with civil ceremony, ring on your finger, surname signed at the registry office, life completely transformed. The world seemed to spin around Lily. She held onto the wall of the hospital corridor, trying to process the words she had just heard. Wife? Whose? I don't even know this man. Mr. Blackwood knows you well enough, continued the lawyer impassively. In exchange, you will have housing, food, clothing, complete medical treatment for your grandmother, total security, and a considerable amount deposited in an exclusive bank account of your own. The marriage contract will last for 2 years. During this period, you cannot abandon the marriage without incurring significant contractual penalties. You must live in the Blackwood family mansion, accompany my client to social events when requested, maintain absolute discretion about his private life and be available for conjugal duties, although my client has guaranteed that nothing will be forced. Lily felt nauseous. He wants to buy me. He wants to offer you an opportunity that few people in your situation would have. Your grandmother needs urgent cardiac surgery. Doctors estimate she has at most 2 weeks without medical intervention. Mr. Blackwood can provide the best specialist in the country. Hospitalization in a private hospital, everything fully paid. The words hit Lily like accurate shots. Grandma Rose was indeed getting worse. Doctors spoke of expensive procedures she could never afford. But the idea of selling herself, even legally, to a man she didn't know, revolted every fiber of her being. No, said Lily, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Tell your client I don't accept. I'm not merchandise to be bought, regardless of the price. The lawyer put the papers back in the leather folder with the same coldness with which he had taken them out. My client expected this response. He said he would contact you again if you changed your mind, but he warned that opportunities like this don't appear twice in a lifetime. Lily returned to her grandmother's room with her heart racing. Grandma Rose slept connected to machines, her pale, wrinkled face looking smaller on the hospital bed. The hands that were once strong, that kneaded the dough for sweets and stroked Lily's hair on nightmare nights, now rested inert on the white sheet. Grandma, I can't do this, she whispered, holding the cold hand. I can't sell myself. You always taught me that dignity is worth more than money. But during the night, while sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, Lily was awakened by alarms. Grandma Rose had had another stroke, more severe. The doctors worked for 3 hours to stabilize her. The next morning, the cardiologist was straightforward. Without surgery, Grandma Rose wouldn't last the week. How much does it cost? Asked Lily, already knowing she wouldn't be able to pay. $120,000, not including complimentary exams and hospitalization. We can try through Medicaid, but the waiting list is 6 months. Lily left the hospital walking through the streets of Chicago like a ghost. She passed through Millennium Park, where she used to sell sweets on weekends, sat on the steps and cried for a full hour. She cried for the grandmother who was dying, for the mother she never knew, for a life that always seemed to conspire against her. It was there, among the pigeons and hurried pedestrians, that Devon found her. As always, he appeared out of nowhere, with his crooked smile and small eyes that seemed to see through clothes. Hi, Princess. Heard your grandma's in bad shape. He sat down beside her without being invited, the strong smell of cigarettes and sweat permeating the air. These things happen to people without protection. Go away, Devon. I'm not in the mood today. Easy, babe. I came to make you a proposal that will solve all your problems. He moved closer, his voice low and threatening. Some friends of mine, important businessmen, have special parties. They need pretty, educated girls who know how to behave. The payment is good, very good. Lily stood up to leave, but he grabbed her arm forcefully. I'm not done talking. 1 night only, Princess. 1 night and you earn the money for your grandma's surgery. That's simple. Let me go. Lily tried to free herself, but Devon squeezed harder. You will accept, darling. Sooner or later, they all accept. And do you know why? Because I'm always right. Your grandma will die, you'll be alone in the world, and when that happens, you'll need protection. My protection. Never. Devon laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the square. Never is a dangerous word, Princess, especially when you have little time. He released her arm and stepped away. I'm patient, but my friends aren't. They want an answer by Friday. Think carefully. Lily returned home trembling, not from cold, but from anger and despair. The empty two-story house seemed to haunt her without her grandmother's presence. She went up to the small room where she had slept since childhood, looked at her mother's photo on the bedside table, at the sweets she hadn't been able to sell that day, at the window that overlooked the backyard where she had played when she still believed the world could be fair. It was then that she found under the door a white envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. Inside, a simple card with a phrase, "The offer still stands. You don't have to face this alone." MB. Along with the card, a photo. Grandma Rose smiling in the hospital, surrounded by smiling doctors, in a private room with flowers on the small tables. On the back, a date. Tomorrow, if you accept. Lily held the card with trembling hands. Michael Blackwood wasn't just offering money. He was offering hope. But at what price? She remembered what her grandmother always said. "My child, God closes a door but always opens a window. Sometimes we just don't see it because we're looking in the wrong place." That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She stayed at the window of her room, observing the few stars visible in the polluted Chicago sky, weighing her options. On one side, Devon and his sinister blackmail. On the other, a man she didn't know, but who at least offered legal dignity. When the sun rose, Lily had made a decision that would change her life forever. The next morning, Lily bathed with the herbal soap her grandmother made at home, wore her best dress, a simple navy blue one she had bought at a thrift store to go to church, and walked to downtown. Her legs trembled with every step, but her determination remained firm. Better a cold contract than a real captivity. Michael Blackwood's office occupied the top 3 floors of a mirrored building on Michigan Avenue. Lily had never been in such an elegant place. Marble on the floor, expensive paintings on the walls, employees dressed like magazine models. When she said her name at the reception, she was immediately escorted by a blonde secretary to the top floor. Michael was waiting for her standing next to a meeting table where the contract papers were organized. He wore a navy blue suit that cost more than Lily earned in a year, but there was something different in his eyes when he saw her enter. A mixture of relief, expectation, and something she couldn't identify. "I thought you wouldn't come," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "I thought about not coming," replied Lily, stopping 3 meters away. "But my grandmother is dying and I have no choice." "We all have choices. Some are just harder than others." Lily studied him for a moment. Up close, Michael was even more handsome than she remembered, but there was a deep sadness in his green eyes that intrigued her. "Why me? You can have any woman you want. Why a sweet seller from the outskirts?" Michael hesitated, as if the question caught him off guard. "Because you reminded me of something I thought I had lost forever." He took a step closer. "Courage." The lawyer explained the terms of the contract in detail. 2 years of civil. Marriage. Lily would move to the Blackwood mansion in Lake Forest, would have a private wing of the house, appropriate clothing, her own bank account with a generous allowance, and complete freedom to visit her grandmother whenever she wanted. In exchange, she should accompany Michael to social events when requested, maintain absolute discretion about his private life, and fulfill conjugal duties when he desired, although he guaranteed he would respect her limits. "And if I want to end the marriage before the 2 years?" asked Lily. "You'll pay a fine of $500,000, the lawyer responded coldly. $500,000? Lily laughed bitterly. "That's more money than I'll see in my entire life." "It's to ensure you fulfill the agreement," said Michael, "just as I will fulfill my side." Lily signed the papers with a trembling hand. Each letter seemed to seal a piece of her soul, but with each signature she thought of Grandma Rose in the hospital, of the doctors who could save her. The civil. Marriage took place on a Thursday afternoon in the most discreet courthouse in Chicago. No flowers, no party, no guests beyond the lawyers who served as witnesses. Lily wore a simple white dress that Michael had sent to her house, and he wore the same blue suit from the day of the contract. When the judge asked if she accepted Michael as her spouse, Lily looked directly into his eyes before answering. I do? The word came out clear, firm, but laden with a melancholy that both felt. When it was Michael's turn, he held Lily's hand, small and calloused inside his, large and soft, and responded, looking directly at her. I do. But there was something in his voice that sounded less like an obligation and more like a promise. The rings were simple white gold without stones. When Michael placed hers on the left ring finger, Lily felt a shiver she couldn't explain. The metal was cold, but his hand was warm. You may kiss, said the judge. Michael approached slowly, giving Lily time to step back if she wanted. She didn't step back. The kiss was chaste, just a soft touch of lips, but lasted a few seconds longer than the protocol required. When they separated, both avoided looking directly at each other. After the ceremony, Michael accompanied Lily to the eye hospital. Grandma Rose had already been transferred to a private room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, was receiving the best care, and the surgery was scheduled for the next day with the best cardiologist in the country. My little granddaughter, whispered Grandma Rose when she saw Lily enter the room. You're different. I'm married, Grandma, said Lily, showing the ring. This is my husband, Michael. Grandma Rose looked at Michael with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long time. Will you take good care of my girl? With my life, replied Michael, and for the first time in 3 years he said something he truly believed. That night, Lily moved to the Blackwood mansion. The estate was immense, with gardens that looked like parks and rooms the size of her entire house. Michael accompanied her to the wing that would be hers, bedroom, bathroom, living room, small kitchen, and stopped at the door. If you need anything, just ask, he said. My room is in the opposite wing. I won't disturb you. Lily nodded, not knowing what to say. When he walked away down the long corridor, she locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing tears to fall. She had saved her grandmother, but at what cost? She was married to a stranger in a house that seemed like a museum, living a life that wasn't hers. Outside, in the opposite wing of the mansion, Michael poured himself a whiskey and looked out, the window at the dark gardens. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't completely alone. And for the first time since Victoria's death, he felt something beyond emptiness. He felt curiosity. The first days at the Blackwood mansion passed like a strange dream. Lily woke up in a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, bathed in a marble bathroom larger than her old living room, and dressed in expensive clothes she found organized in the closet, all in her exact size, chosen by someone who had studied her discreet and respectful style. Michael rigorously fulfilled his promise not to disturb her. He left early for the office, returned late, dined alone in his wing of the house. They met only in the corridors, exchanging polite greetings like two strangers in a fine hotel. Good morning, Lily. Good morning, Michael. Nothing more. But she felt his eyes on her during these brief encounters, an intense gaze that made her blush without knowing why. The house had discreet staff. Martha, the housekeeper who had worked there for 20 years, John, the driver and security guard, and 3 more employees who took care of cleaning and gardening. All treated her with respect, but Lily perceived the barely disguised curiosity. She was very young, very simple, very different from what they expected of the new lady of the Yor house. Mr. Michael's first wife was a society lady, Martha told her one afternoon while they had coffee in the kitchen. Mrs. Victoria, a beautiful, educated woman from the best family. They loved each other very much. The housekeeper sighed. It was a tragedy when she died. The master was never the same. How did she die? Asked Lily, trying to sound casual. Fell down the main staircase. She was 7 months pregnant. We lost both in a single night. Martha lowered her voice. But there was something strange that night. Mrs. Victoria never went down the stairs without holding the railing, and she was going down very fast, as if she were running away from something or someone. Lily felt a shiver. What do you mean? Nothing, girl. They're just an old woman's thoughts. The important thing is that now you're here, and the master seems less somber. Less somber. Lily doubted that. Michael remained as distant as on the first day, but she began to notice small details. He left fresh flowers in the vase at the entrance. Whenever she mentioned liking a specific color, he had American desserts prepared for dessert when he knew she was homesick for her grandmother's food. He provided a piano in the living room of her wing when he heard her humming recipes in the kitchen. At night, Lily heard noises coming from the forbidden wing of the house. Heavy footsteps, doors slamming, sometimes the muffled sound of something being broken. One night, curiosity was stronger than prudence. She left her room barefoot and followed the noises through the dark corridors. The forbidden wing was on the second floor, separated by a dark wooden door that was always locked. But that night the door was ajar. Lily pushed it slowly and entered a corridor that smelled of mold and sadness. At the end of the corridor, a faint light came from an open room. What she saw left her breathless. It was a complete baby's room. Carved mahogany crib, dresser full of neatly folded baby clothes, a rocking horse in the corner, pictures with the name Peter Blackwood painted in gold, all covered by a thin layer of dust, like an abandoned sanctuary. Michael was on his knees, in the middle of the room, holding a small blue baby shoe, his shoulders shaking in silent sobs. Lily had never seen a man cry like that, with a pain so deep it seemed to come from the bowels. She backed away slowly, but stepped on a floorboard that creaked. Michael turned, his face wet with tears, his eyes red with pain and whiskey. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, Lily didn't know what to say. All of Michael's coldness had disappeared, leaving only a man shattered by loss. "His name was going to be Peter," continued Michael, as if talking to himself. "Victoria had already bought everything. She spent hours here, talking to her belly, making plans." He stood up, stumbling a little. "The night they died, we had an argument. She discovered something about me, about my business, and threatened to leave me. Said she didn't want the child to grow up near a man like me." "What kind of business?" asked Lily, although part of her didn't want to know the answer. Michael laughed bitterly. "The ones that pay for this house, for this life, for your grandmother's surgery. I'm not just a civil construction businessman, Lily. I have other activities, less legal." Lily's world shook. "You're a criminal. I'm a man who does what needs to be done to maintain his power, just as you did what you needed to save your grandmother." He approached her, and Lily could smell the whiskey on his breath. "The difference is that you keep your hands clean. Mine." He didn't finish the sentence, but Lily understood. She was married to a dangerous man, involved in shady business, tormented by the death of his first wife, and for the first time since signing the contract, she felt real fear. But there was something else in Michael's eyes at that moment, a vulnerability that touched her deeply. Without thinking, she approached and touched his tear-stained face. "You didn't kill your wife," she said softly. "Whatever happened that night, you didn't push her." "How can you be sure?" "Because you've been crying for her for 3 years. Men who kill their wives don't build sanctuaries for the children they lost." Michael held her hand against his face, closed his eyes, and for the first time since they met, Lily saw the man behind the mask of power. That night, something changed between them. Michael didn't close the door to the baby's room when they left, as if finally ready to let the past breathe. Lily accompanied him to his wing of the house, walking in silence through the marble corridors, but not as strangers, as two people who had shared a wound. "Thank you," he said when they reached his bedroom door, "for not judging me." "We all carry ghosts," replied Lily. "Mine are just less bloody than yours." In the following days, the dynamic between them subtly transformed. Michael began dining in the main dining room and invited Lily to join him. She accepted, and the silent meals gave way to cautious conversations. He asked about her grandmother, who had recovered magnificently from surgery, and was already talking about returning home. She asked about his work, the legal part at least. "Why construction?" she wanted to know one night while they shared a dessert of bread pudding. "Because it's about building things that last," replied Michael. "My father always said that a man is defined by what remains standing after he dies." He stopped, the fork suspended in the air. Although lately I wonder if it's worth building anything when everything can collapse in a night. It was about Victoria. They always returned to her even when they didn't mention her name. One Saturday afternoon, Lily was in the kitchen preparing fudge, a recipe from her grandmother that she made when feeling nostalgic, when Michael appeared at the door. She had never seen him at home during weekends, and certainly never in the kitchen. "Can I help?" he asked hesitantly. Lily looked at him with surprise. "Do you know how to cook?" "No, but I can learn." She laughed, the first genuine laugh he had heard since they met. "All right, but I warn you it's dirty work." Michael took off his jacket, rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt, and positioned himself beside her at the counter. Lily showed him how to make the fudge balls, how to roll them in sprinkles, how to arrange them on the tray. Michael's hands were large and clumsy for that delicate work, and he made a terrible mess, smearing his fingers with chocolate and spreading sprinkles all over the counter. "You're terrible at this," said Lily, laughing when he tried to form a ball that looked more like an irregular amoeba. "I never said I was good, I said I could learn." There was something hypnotizing about seeing him concentrated on such a simple task, eyebrows furrowed in determination, a chocolate stain on his face that he didn't notice. Lily approached to clean the stain with a kitchen towel, and when their eyes met, both stopped breathing. Michael held her hand against his face as he had done in the baby's room, but this time there were no tears. There was something much more, dangerous desire. He approached slowly, giving her time to back away, but Lily didn't move. When their lips touched, it was as if an invisible barrier finally yielded. The kiss began softly, almost timidly, but deepened when Lily responded, her hands clutching his shirt, pulling him closer. Michael pressed her against the counter, his hands on her waist, and for a moment they forgot about the world, the contracts, the reasons that had brought them together. When they separated, both were breathless. "This wasn't in the contract," whispered Lily. "No," agreed Michael, his forehead against hers. "This is real." During the following weeks, they became inseparable. They dined together every night, spent weekends walking through the mansion's gardens, talking about books, about dreams, about everything except his past and their future. Lily discovered that Michael played the piano magnificently, and he discovered that she sang with a sweet, in-tune voice. Some nights he played while she sang, and the mansion filled with music it hadn't heard in years. The staff noticed the change. Martha smiled more. John, the driver, commented that the boss seemed 10 years younger. Even the gardens seemed more colorful. Lily was beginning to believe that this could work, that something true could be born from the cold contract, when her illusion was brutally shattered. It was on a Thursday morning. She went down to the kitchen earlier than usual and heard Michael talking on the phone in his office, the door ajar. His voice was cold, calculating, completely different from the caring man she was getting to know. "Yes, she's yielding as planned," he was saying to someone on the other end of the line. It wasn't difficult. Girls like her are predictable. A little attention, some romantic gestures, and they mold to what you want. The contract is being fulfilled to the letter. In less than a year and a half, I'll be free of her and with my father's inheritance untouched. Lily felt the world collapse around her. Inheritance, what inheritance, and what did he mean by mold? "Don't worry," continued Michael. "She doesn't suspect anything. She believes she's in love. It's touching, actually. I almost feel bad for using her feelings, but business is business. When the contract ends, she'll return to her place with a nice severance package and a lesson about not getting involved with men above her class." Each word was a stab in Lily's heart. Everything had been a farce. The dinners, the conversations, the kisses, the music. He was just fulfilling a plan, molding her like a clay doll for his purposes. She ran up to her room, locked the door, and for the first time since arriving at that house, cried until she had no more tears. Afterward, with a cold determination she didn't know she possessed, she took the ring off her finger, threw it on the dresser, and began packing. If Michael Blackwood wanted to play, she would show that she could also be strategic. But first, she needed to discover what that story about inheritance was. And then she would disappear from his life in a way he would never forget. Lily disappeared for 2 whole days. She simply vanished from the mansion without telling anyone, leaving only the ring on the dresser and an empty drawer where she kept her few personal clothes. Michael discovered her absence at dinner time, when Martha came to ask if the lady would dine in her room, since she hadn't come down for the meal. He ran up to her wing, found the door unlocked and the room arranged, as if no one had ever lived there. The only evidence that Lily had existed were the piano scores left on the instrument in the living room, with her pencil annotations in the margins and the sweet vanilla smell that still permeated the air. "Find her," he ordered Marcus over the phone, his voice tense in a way the investigator hadn't heard since Victoria's death. "Search the entire city if necessary, but find her." "She might have returned to her grandmother's house," suggested Marcus. "I've already had it checked. The house has been empty for weeks. Her grandmother is still recovering at the nursing home I paid for." During these 2 days, Michael didn't sleep, didn't eat properly, couldn't concentrate on important meetings. He walked through the mansion like a ghost, entering her room several times a day, as if he could materialize Lily through the force of will. It was Martha who asked the question he didn't want to face. "Did you do something to the girl, sir?" "No," he replied, but his voice didn't even convince himself. In truth, Lily was much closer than he imagined. She had taken refuge in a small, cheap hotel in downtown Chicago and spent the days at the public library, researching everything she could about the Blackwood family. What she discovered left her even more confused and furious. Michael had lied about almost everything. His father, George Blackwood, had recently died, leaving a peculiar testamentary clause. His son would only inherit the complete family fortune if he was married for at least 2 years to a woman of proven character. If he remained single or got divorced before that period, half the inheritance would be donated to charitable institutions. The question was, why had he chosen her specifically? There were thousands of high society women who would marry him without hesitation. Why seek a sweet seller from the outskirts? The answer came in the form of a letter that Lily found hidden among the marriage contract papers, a letter that the lawyer had forgotten to remove. It was from George Blackwood to his son, written shortly before dying. "Michael, you've become a cold, calculating man, incapable of true love. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. If you want my inheritance, prove that you are still capable of feeling something genuine for another person. Marry a woman you cannot buy, who won't be impressed by your money, who will challenge you to be better. Only then will you discover if there's still humanity in you." Lily read the letter 3 times before understanding completely. She hadn't been chosen by chance. George Blackwood had investigated her life, knew of her integrity, of her refusal to sell herself to Devon, of her dignity even in poverty. He wanted his son to fall in love with a woman impossible to corrupt. The father's plan was working better than he could have imagined. Michael had really fallen in love. Lily had seen it in his eyes, felt it in the way he touched her, heard it in the music they made together. But her wounded pride wouldn't let her accept that everything had begun as a manipulation. On the morning of the 3rd day, when she finally returned to the mansion, she found Michael waiting for her at the main entrance. He was disheveled, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice hoarse with worry and relief. "Discovering who you really are," replied Lily, handing him his father's letter, "and discovering who I really am to you." Michael read the letter with an increasingly pale face. When he finished, he looked at her with an expression that mixed surprise, guilt, and something very close to despair. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Your father wanted you to learn to truly love someone, and I was the chosen guinea pig. The question is, did you learn?" "Lily, don't lie to me, not anymore." She approached him, her eyes shining with contained tears. "I heard your phone conversation about molding me, about fulfilling the contract, about returning me to my place when it all ended." Michael closed his eyes as if taking a punch to the stomach. "That was before—" "Before what? Before deciding you could use me in a more interesting way? Before discovering I was harder to break than you imagined? Before. I fell in love with you. The confession came out like a desperate shout. Before realizing you're the only good thing that's happened in my life in years, before discovering I can be a better man when I'm with you. Lily looked at him for a long moment, studying his face for signs of lying. Prove it, she finally said. How? Tear up the contract, marry me again, without clauses, without fines, without deadlines, or let me go now forever. Michael hesitated only a second before pulling the contract from the inside pocket of his jacket. He had been carrying it with him for 2 days, as if it were a talisman, and tearing it in half, then in quarters, then into pieces so small they looked like confetti. Done, he said, letting the papers fall to the marble floor. Now you're free to choose. Lily looked at the remains of the contract, then at the man who was watching her with his heart exposed in his hands. I choose, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of cars arriving at high speed at the mansion's gate. Devon had returned, and this time he didn't come alone. The electronic gate of the Blackwood mansion exploded in sparks when the 2 black cars drove through it without slowing down. Michael pushed Lily behind the marble column of the entrance, while the sound of tires squealing on the asphalt echoed through the perfectly maintained garden. Go inside the house and lock yourself in my office, he ordered, his voice firm despite the fear that shone in his eyes. The door is bulletproof. There's a direct phone to the police. I won't leave you alone, said Lily, grabbing his arm. This is not the time for heroism, Lily. Devon didn't come here to talk. Before they could argue further, 5 men jumped out of the cars, all armed, led by Devon, who smiled with the cruelty of someone who had finally found his cornered prey. He looked different from previous encounters, thinner, with scars on his face, bloodshot eyes of someone using heavy drugs. Michael Blackwood, shouted Devon, walking toward the mansion entrance, with his gun pointed forward. It turned out more expensive than you imagined to steal my merchandise, didn't it? Your merchandise, replied Michael, stepping out from behind the column but keeping Lily protected. Lily was never yours. The princess has owed me favors for years, and now that I've discovered where she's been hiding, I've come to collect, with interest. John, the mansion's driver and security guard, appeared from the side of the house with his own gun, but was quickly surrounded by 2 of Devon's men. Martha and the other employees hid in the kitchen, following security protocols that Michael had established years before for situations like this. What do you want? Asked Michael, mentally calculating distances, exits, chances of protecting. Lily, $50,000 for the time lost looking for the princess, and she comes with me to settle the family debts. Her grandma incurred some very expensive medical expenses lately. I don't owe you anything, shouted Lily, stepping out from behind Michael despite his protests. I paid all my grandmother's debts. Devon laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the garden. Paid with his money, princess, but with me, accounts don't transfer. Your debts are your debts. There is no debt, said Michael, taking a step forward. You're inventing excuses for a kidnapping. Kidnapping? Devon feigned indignation. What an ugly word. I'd say it's a overdue business meeting. It was then that Lily noticed something that froze her blood. One of Devon's men was pouring gasoline on the side of the mansion. They didn't just want money. They wanted to destroy everything. Michael, she whispered, touching his arm. He followed her gaze and saw what she had seen. Sons of bitches, he muttered between his teeth. That's right, rich boy, said Devon, noticing they had perceived the plan. Either you cooperate or the mansion becomes a barbecue, with you inside. Michael knew he couldn't hand over Lily. Not after everything they had been through together, not after discovering he truly loved her. But he also knew that Devon's men weren't joking. He recognized the type, heavy drug addicts with nothing to lose, capable of any violence. Fine, he said finally. You win, but leave the house alone. There are innocent people inside. No, shouted Lily. I won't go with him. I'd rather die. How romantic, mocked Devon. But you won't die, princess. You'll just work for me until your debts are paid. A few years at most. The word work sounded like what it really meant, and Lily felt nauseous. This was what she had escaped when she accepted Michael's contract, and now she was back to the same nightmare. That's when Michael made a decision that changed everything. Instead of continuing to negotiate, he threw himself at Devon, knocking him to the cobblestone ground of the garden. The shot that came from the gun barely missed Lily's head, shattering the glass of the mansion's front door. What followed was total chaos. John managed to disarm one of the men and began a physical fight. Lily ran into the house, but not to hide. She went to get the kitchen knife she knew Martha kept in the emergency drawer. When she returned to the garden, Michael was bleeding from a cut on his face, but still struggling with Devon for control of the gun. Another of the men was pointing his pistol at them, unable to shoot for fear of hitting his own boss. Lily didn't think. She acted on instinct, running behind the armed man and burying the knife between his ribs with all the strength she had. He screamed, turned around and hit her in the face with his closed fist, knocking her to the ground. The sound of the police siren echoed in the distance. John had managed to activate the silent alarm. Devon heard the sound and knew he had few minutes before the cars arrived. "This isn't over," he shouted, pushing Michael and running to the car. "You owe me, princess, and I always collect my debts." The remaining men followed him, leaving one of them wounded behind. In less than 2 minutes they had disappeared into the streets of Chicago, leaving the mansion's garden looking like a war zone. Michael ran to Lily, who was sitting on the ground, with her face bleeding where she had been hit. "Are you okay? Did you hurt anything?" "I'm fine," she lied, although she felt as if her head would explode. "And you?" "Alive," he replied, helping her to stand. "Thanks to you." When the police arrived, they found them embracing among the debris, holding onto each other as if the world might collapse at any moment. And perhaps it really could. Memorial Hospital in the early morning had that characteristic smell of disinfectant and fear that Lily knew well from the days she had accompanied her grandmother's recovery. Michael was in the treatment room, getting stitches on the cut that crossed his forehead from his eyebrow to his hairline, when the detective in charge of the case arrived to take statements. "From what I understand, you knew the aggressor," said Detective Carver, a 50-year-old man with the face of someone who had seen it all. "Devon Harris has an extensive criminal history: trafficking, pimping, extortion. Do you have any idea of the motive for the attack?" Lily exchanged a look with Michael. How to explain that it all started with her refusing Devon's indecent proposals? How to tell about the marriage contract, about the inheritance, about the whole story that had brought them here? "He had been bothering me for years," Lily finally said. "When I got married and left the neighborhood, he must have been furious and decided he could invade private property, armed to resolve a personal issue," added Michael, allowing the nurse to finish cleaning his wound. The detective made some notes, but Lily noticed he wasn't completely buying the story. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have any involvement with illegal activities that might have motivated this attack?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds too long. Michael knew his reputation wasn't spotless, that there were rumors about his less legal businesses, but he had never been formally accused of anything. "I've been a civil construction businessman for 15 years, Detective. My businesses are transparent." "Of course," said Carver without conviction. "In any case, I recommend you hire additional security. Men like Devon Harris don't give up easily, and today's invasion was just a warning." When the detective left, Michael and Lily were alone in the hospital corridor. She was sitting in a plastic chair, an ice pack on her face where Devon had hit her, observing the people passing by. Anxious families, tired doctors, efficient nurses. "You saved my life." "Today," said Michael, sitting beside her. "You saved mine first, Lily." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I never wanted you to get hurt because of me. When I saw that man pointing the gun at you, I thought I was going to die. But you didn't die. We're both alive." "Barely. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Lily turned to look at him. "Next time." Devon won't give up. You heard the detective. Men like him don't forget a humiliation like today's. Michael ran his hand through his hair, tired. "And I can't protect you if you're with me." "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying maybe it's better if you go away. Far from Chicago, far from me, far from all this mess." Lily felt as if she'd been slapped. "You're sending me away? I'm trying to keep you alive. Deciding for me, Again. She stood up, throwing the ice pack in a nearby trash can. First your father decides I would be perfect for his plans. Then you decide I would be a good contracted wife. Now you decide it would be better if I disappeared from your life. Is anyone here going to ask me what I want? What you want could get you killed, Lily. What I want, she said, her voice rising in volume, is to stop being treated like a doll that everyone can move around at their convenience. What I want is for you to stop making decisions about my life without consulting me. You're trying to run away. You're afraid that being with me is too complicated, too dangerous, too real, and you want an excuse to go back to your safe, controlled life. The accusation hit Michael like a punch, because there was a part of truth in it. He was afraid of loving someone again and losing her like he lost Victoria, afraid that his violent life would destroy Lily's purity, afraid of discovering he didn't deserve to be loved by a woman like her. Maybe you're right, he finally said. Maybe I'm too cowardly to fight for what I want. Then tell me, said Lily, approaching him, what do you want? Michael looked into her eyes, brown, determined, shining with tears she refused to shed. I want you. I want to wake up every day by your side. I want to hear you singing in the kitchen. I want you to teach me to make terrible fudge for the rest of my life. Then fight for it. And if I can't protect you, then we'll fight together, like we did today. Michael was silent for a long moment, observing Lily's injured face, remembering how she had risked her own life to save him a few hours earlier. Are you sure, even knowing my life is complicated, that there will always be dangers, that I'm not the good man you deserve? I'm sure of one thing only, replied Lily. You're the man I choose, not by contract, not by necessity, not by gratitude, by love. But when Michael tried to approach to embrace her, Lily took a step back. But first, she said, I need time to process all this, to decide if I can live with your secrets, with your enemies, with all the violence that comes with you. How much time? I don't know. Maybe weeks, maybe months. I'll stay with my grandmother for a while, think about what I really want from life. Michael nodded, although each word was like a stab. And then? Then I'll give you an answer, a definitive answer. That morning, when they left the hospital, each went a different way. Michael returned to his empty mansion, and Lily went to the nursing home, where her grandmother was recovering, carrying on her shoulders the weight of a decision that would change the course of both their lives. 2.5 months passed like 2 different eternities. Lily spent her days caring for Grandma Rose, who had recovered magnificently, and now walked around the nursing home's yard telling stories to other ladies about her granddaughter, who married a prince from the big city. In her free afternoons, Lily opened a small confectionery in Lincoln Park, returning to her roots, to her grandmother's recipes, to the simple life she knew before Michael. But the nights were different. At night, when she closed the confectionery and returned to the small apartment she had rented near the nursing home, Lily felt an emptiness she couldn't fill. She touched the place where she used to wear the ring, remembered the piano in the mansion, Michael's voice humming while they cooked together, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. On the other side of the city, Michael was living his own version of hell. He had reinforced the mansion's security, hired investigators to locate Devon, who had completely disappeared, and tried to return to his routine from before. But nothing was like before. The house seemed like a mausoleum. He could no longer eat in the dining room without remembering the conversations with Lily. He couldn't pass by the piano without hearing echoes of her voice singing. Martha, worried about her boss who was losing weight and barely sleeping, took an unexpected initiative. On a Thursday afternoon, she appeared at Lily's confectionery, carrying a tray with the fudge she had taught Michael to make. "He made these for you," said the housekeeper, placing the tray on the counter. "They're terrible, as always, but he insists on trying." Lily looked at the malformed fudge. Some stuck to the mold, others disintegrated, and felt like crying and laughing at the same time. "How is he?" "Bad. Very bad. Doesn't eat properly, doesn't sleep, spends nights in the office working as if the world were ending tomorrow." Martha sighed. "Girl, I raised that boy. I saw him lose his first wife, saw him close himself off to other world, but I never saw him love someone like he loves you. Love isn't enough, said Lily, though her voice came out less convincing than she intended. There's a lot that doesn't work between us. Everything worth having requires work, dear. And from what I've seen, you two are capable of fighting for anything when you're together. That night, Lily stayed awake until late looking at the imperfect fudge, thinking about the conversation with Martha, remembering everything she had lived through with Michael. The fear, the passion, the complicity, the growth. He wasn't perfect, but he was hers, and she wasn't the same naive girl who sold sweets on the street. She had become a woman capable of making her own decisions and fighting for them. On Friday morning, she made a decision she had postponed for too long. When the simple car parked in front of Michael's corporate building, some employees were surprised to see a young woman in a navy blue dress and white sneakers go up to the penthouse carrying a tray of homemade sweets. The secretary tried to stop her, but Lily simply said, "I'm Lily Blackwood, he will see me." Michael was in an important meeting with Japanese investors when the secretary knocked on the office door. He was about to say he didn't want to be disturbed when he heard the name Lily Blackwood. "Cancel the meeting," he told the Japanese, who were perplexed by the sudden change in priorities. "We'll reschedule for next week." When Lily entered the office, Michael was standing behind the mahogany desk, visibly thinner, with deep, dark circles, but his eyes shining with an intensity she hadn't seen in months. "You came as Lily Blackwood?" he asked, echoing the words of the contract they had signed so long ago. "No," she replied, placing the tray on the desk and approaching slowly. "I came as Lily Sanders, the woman who loves you, but only if you want me as a choice, not as a necessity." Michael came around the desk, stopping a few inches from her. "And if I say you're both, that I choose you every day, but that I also need you as I need air to breathe, then I would say we're speaking the same language." He extended his hand, and she took it. "No contracts this time?" "No contracts, just promises we make to each other." "What kind of promises?" Lily smiled, and it was as if the sun entered the somber office. "That we'll build something new, that when problems arise, and they will, we'll face them together, that you'll stop trying to protect me by making decisions for me, and I'll stop running away when things get difficult. And Devon, and all the dangers that come with me? Devon is a coward who only attacks those who are alone, and I won't be alone anymore, neither will you." Michael held Lily's face between his hands, observing every detail he had kept in memory during the months of separation. "I love you," he said. "I've loved you since the day you returned my money on the sidewalk. I love you because you taught me I could be better than I thought." "I love you too," she replied. "I love who you are when you're with me. I love who I become when I'm with you." When they kissed, it wasn't like the first hesitant kiss in the kitchen, nor like the desperate kiss at the hospital. It was like the first kiss of their real lives, of the people they had become together, of the promises they were making without witnesses or contracts. Outside, Chicago continued its frantic life, but there in that office, two people who had met in the most unlikely circumstances discovered that true love doesn't need documents to be legal, doesn't need deadlines to be eternal, and doesn't need perfection to be perfect. 3 months later, they married again. This time with flowers, with a party, with Grandma Rose crying with emotion in the front row.